Over the last few years, the London system has received a lot of hate online. A lot of people calling it a boring opening, or a low-level opening, or just a bad opening. And today I am here because I want to bring justice to the London system, an opening that I personally have been playing for a very long time, have had a lot of success with, and that I love. And so I want to show you all 3 games that Grandmasters have played in the London system. And you're going to see that these are no random Grandmasters. The first is going to be Liren, the last world chess champion before Gukesh. Then we're going to have a game from Gukesh, which is the current world chess champion. And then finally a game from Magnus Carlsen, the god himself. And Magnus has said multiple times that he likes the London system and that he doesn't understand all of the hate around it. So let's just jump right in and let's have a look at the game by Ding Liren. And this is a game that Ding played against Ian Nepomniachtchi in the 2023 World Chess Championship match. And the first few moves were just a very standard London system. And this was, interestingly, the first time that the London system had ever been played in a World Chess Championship. So let's see how this went for Ding. Now, Ian Nepomniachtchi decided to go for c5, a very standard move, and usually white creates this kind of setup that looks like a pyramid in the center. Now, one of the pawns has been exchanged in the center, so we don't have the pyramid, but so far we basically have a very straightforward mainline London system. Now, we have a trade here rather than the typical bishop to g3 and castles. Everything looks very normal. And Ding brings a rook to the center. Now, out of the opening, the position is equal. The engine thinks that black has already equalized, but the truth is that this is still a very dynamic position, and white is very likely going to try and reach e5 with a knight. That is a square that is very important in the London system. And in fact, he jumps right in there in a couple of moves. Now, the knight goes back. Ian is trying to probably reroute this knight to the king side. We gain some space on the queen side and this drop back of the bishop to f1. Now, there is a little bit of a dance with the knights here. Ding decides to simply trade one of the knights, the queen goes back, and now Ding gains some more space on the queen side. So the position is now already back to being ever so slightly better for white. White has some nice space on the queen side, some good control of the center, some active pieces, and the knight is probably going to reach f3. Now the queen goes to f3. We have a rook lift by Ding, a very deep move that foresees in the future a possible swing to the king side. Knight b3, knight to c6, the queen swings around to the king side, and now Ding decides to launch an attack with the h-pawn. Look at this, the a-pawn has marched all the way to a5, and now the h-pawn is being pushed to h4. Nepo starts putting some pressure on the e-file, and he's probably trying to go for a pawn break in the center, and he does indeed do that right now. Now we have this very weird looking move by Ding, rook to b3, and he's simply aiming at this pawn. Now this does drop a pawn here, but after Ding captures with the rook on e5, the queen has to move. Now he attacks the knight's move. He swaps off the somewhat bad bishop for that very active knight, pushes the bishop away, and now a very important move. He picks up a pawn, and he successfully manages to run away with the knight. The knight cannot be taken because of rook takes e8 check that would be able to pick up the queen. So let's say rook takes and queen takes, and white would be completely winning. Now the rook takes in the center, and Ding takes with the queen. So the position is somewhat in the balance, still probably definitely better for white, simply because white has some more activity here. But black does pick up a pawn, and now there is an outside passer here on the queen side. And it's going to be a matter of, can Ding somehow stop this passer and create an attack with his pieces? The king goes to the side of the board. And we have this move here attacking the queen. Ding is just trying to kind of attack this king side somehow, bring some more pieces into the game. But in the meantime, Nepo starts walking with his a-pawn. And he's trying to promote it. I mean, it doesn't really look like white is focused on stopping this pawn. All of the black pieces are supporting the push. And the white pieces, in the meantime, are doing something on the king side. Now, the rook goes to c7. Very active square. We are basically just threatening checkmate, so the rook has to defend. And now we have this move, knight d5. And Ding is creating a lot of threats. For example, now taking on f6 would simply win a pawn because this pawn here is pinned to the king. So the king has to move. And now the rook attacks the pawn pushes. And it almost looks like black is simply going to either get a queen or force white to sacrifice his rook for a pawn. But now we have this move, knight to e7, attacking the rook. The rook moves away. And now a very, very important and incredible move. And I remember seeing this game live 2 years ago and thinking, what is d5? And d5 is an incredibly deep move. A move that even the Grandmasters commented in the game couldn't quite understand at the time. But d5 is basically setting up a mating net. So the pawn pushes and it's only one square away from getting a queen. But now we have queen to c7 and it's preparing to give this check with the knight and then checkmate here. So for example, if now a queen is made, we have check and any move by the king results in checkmate. So instead, Nepo moves the king up. Now there's no check and he can come here with the rook. But this is the idea that the Ding had seen. Queen to f7. And queen to f7 is preparing a beautiful checkmate with knight and rook. And now if black prepares to promote to a new queen, there is this beautiful sacrifice, queen takes g8. The king has to take, the rook checks, the king goes up, and now rook to f8 would be a checkmate with the knight and rook. And this pawn here was the key element that allows the checkmate. Beautiful game by Ding Liren, and a game that makes the London system have a 100% win rate in World Chess Championship matches. Quite impressive stuff. Now on to the second game. This is a game played by Gukesh Domaraju, the current World Chess Champion, against Ariantari, a very strong Grandmaster at Norway Chess. Now Gukesh opens up with the London system. We love to see it. And Ariantari goes for this g6 setup. Now, typically nowadays it's suggested to go knight to c3 when we see this setup and kind of switch to a Jobava London, but Gukesh plays basically just all of the normal main moves of the London system, but then he does follow up with this h4 plan. And this move is basically just trying to use the g-pawn as a hook in the future. Now we have c5 by Ariantari, and Gukesh jumps in the center. Again, this e5 square becomes very important. Some development by both players, and now Gukesh decides to jump in the opponent's territory with this knight. And the issue is that this queen doesn't have many moves. It couldn't come out because of the bishop, so it has to come here. And now Gukesh launches the b-pawn, and he's trying to reach the knight and defend it and have an incredibly powerful outpost in the black side. The knight goes forward. Notice that this is not a free pawn, because after these moves there is this, attacking the queen, attacking the knight, and winning a piece. So Gukesh doesn't take. He castles. There is a strike in the center. The bishop drops back. And now he manages to finally defend the knight in the center. The bishop attacks, and he plays c4. Now, if the bishop takes, like he does, and takes back, for some reason Ariantari doesn't find the courage in the game to take the pawn back. And instead, he plays this knight d to f6, which allows e4 by Gukesh. And look at this pawn structure in the center. Like, what is this? 3 pawns on each side, just attacking each other. It's like a Mexican standoff, a triple Mexican standoff. Crazy stuff. And Ariantari decides to take in the center, but now pawn takes, and after queen takes, knight takes, queen takes, Gukesh manages to play d5, and now he has 2 passed pawns, connected passed pawns, in the middle of the position. Somehow these pawns have walked past all of the defenses of the black pieces, and they're simply marching down the board. So now the knight goes back, and Ariantari is gonna try and stop these pawns somehow, while Gukesh is simply going to walk them up the board. We see some maneuvers. The pawns are only one step away from promoting. The bishop tries to cut the communication of the queen with the pawns, but now the queen swings to this side of the board, and because these pawns are so powerful, Gukesh can afford to start playing some crazy chess, and he sacrifices first the bishop, and then he sacrifices his queen. And the queen cannot be taken, because if that happens, Gukesh is simply going to be able to promote with check. The rook is going to take, and he's going to get a new queen, and he would be completely winning. So instead, we have this move by Ariantari picking up one of the two pawns, but the other pawn is simply protected by the bishop. So Gukesh is going to maneuver, and eventually he manages to convert his position, and he wins after another very nice move. The bishop cannot be taken, because this would either win the rook or force a new queen on the board. A beautiful win by Gukesh that demonstrates again the crushing power of the London system, even at the highest level of chess. And now finally, as promised, we have a London system by none other than Magnus Carlsen, and he demonstrates a masterclass in how he approaches the London system. Now he's playing against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, which is a very strong grandmaster, and again we see a lot of very normal moves. And we see that Magnus often likes to simply leave the bishop there, again, rather than retreating, which would be the more typical London setup. He knows that his opponent is most likely not going to take that bishop. So instead, he leaves it there, and his argument is, if you take this bishop, I am going to have a stronghold on the e5 square, and I'm going to protect the d-pawn with my c-pawn, and I basically control the center. So because of that, Mamedyarov doesn't take, he castles, we have c3, some more London standard moves, and he attacks on the queen side with c5. Now we have bishop t3, again the perfect position for the bishop in the London system. We are looking at the king side, and now Magnus lashes out with h4 and h5. This is the second time that we see this attack, and well, actually in all of the games we've seen h4, because we very often want to attack the king side in the London system. We have these beautiful bishops looking that way. And also this prepares in case Mamedyarov ever tries, well, he can't do that now because that hangs the knight, but if in the future he tries to attack the bishop could now drop back to h2. Okay, so Mamedyarov develops a knight, and Magnus brings the queen to f3. Rook to c8, and now we have h5, a very important move that Mamedyarov shouldn't have allowed, because now actually, after h6 and queen to g3, Magnus is simply threatening to take this pawn here, because this pawn is going to be pinned to the king, and there is pretty much no way to stop that threat. So Mamedyarov goes back with the knight, allows the capture, and now he takes in the center. But Magnus finds a brilliant idea. He simply sacrifices the bishop, the knight can take, but he can play now h6, the knight is pinned to the king, so he's going to win back the material and have a devastating attack on the king side. The queen comes out, Magnus captures the knight, the queen captures, and now a beautiful move, bishop to h7, forcing the king to move. The queen is pinned, she cannot take, and now we have knight to f7, a full knight sacrifice. The rook takes, and Magnus gives this discover check, forces the king back, picks up the rook, the king takes, and now he picks up this bishop in the center. So a beautiful sequence where Magnus simply threw everything at this black king, and now the king is extremely exposed, and Magnus is simply completely winning in this position. We see a trade on c3, and now this move threatening checkmate in one move, but Magnus being Magnus, he sees that, he covers it, and now he simply proceeds to do his magic, and he converts this winning endgame into a win. Mamedyarov did have some threats. He was always very close to mating one, but unfortunately there was never the actual occasion to play that. Everything was defended, and Mamedyarov resigned in this position. So hopefully I was able to demonstrate to you with these 3 beautiful games by some of the best players in the world, the fact that the London system is a viable opening, and actually a very good opening that can win even at the very highest level of chess and in classical chess with the Gukesh game and Ding Liren's game. This game by Magnus, I believe, was a rapid game, but nonetheless, the London is great. Play the London system, have fun, win a lot of games, and maybe give it a break. there are other openings that you can easily make fun of. All right, if you guys like this type of content, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.